the 19th of August, 1944. East Prussia. In the dim light of Hitler's Wolfschanze, Generaloberst Alfred Jodl studies the math the way a machinist studies tolerances: cold, exact, unforgiving. The Western Front is collapsing, yes, but numbers don't lie. Patton's Third Army has sprinted too far, too fast, roughly 400 miles from the Normandy beaches to the point of the spear. No army outruns physics. An armoured division drinks 150,000 gallons of fuel per day in the advance. An infantry division eats 700 tons. An armoured division swallows 1,000. Multiply by 12 divisions. Stretch the line over shattered French roads. Subtract bridges, railheads, and sleep. The answer should be paralysis. Staff officers murmur the comfortable conclusion. The Americans have outrun their logistics. Patton will halt in days, maybe hours. The Wehrmacht will regroup on the Seine, breathe, seed the riverbanks with 88 seconds, let the autumn rain thicken the roads into glue. Winter will do the rest. History, they believe, is on their side. Russia proved it. Blitzkrieg dies when fuel trucks cannot find the panzers. The lesson is old and ironclad. What none of them can see from the concrete forest of the wolf's lair is the line of light already moving against doctrine and probability. 125 miles to the west. Nearly 6,000 trucks, 5,958 by the ledger, are already in motion. Headlamps on, convoy intervals measured not by caution but by urgency, 5 minutes apart, speed held at 35 miles per hour like a metronome set to grind. They carry 12,500 tons every 24 hours, and they will do it again tomorrow and the next day, until the arithmetic of defeat becomes the calculus of momentum. The name for this river of engines is simple railroad slang repurposed for war, the Red Ball Express. The German generals never planned for this. Their science assumed concealment, dispersion, blackout textbook discipline, born from scarcity. The Americans answer with volume. Where German doctrine files requisitions, the Americans improvise. Where German maintenance schedules, the Americans cannibalize. Where German planners compute acceptable loss, the Americans accept waste as the price of speed engines swapped roadside in 45 minutes. Disabled trucks shoved into ditches, replacements summoned from a factory ocean across the Atlantic. It is not elegance, it is abundance. Weaponized. By doctrine, headlights at night invite air attack. By doctrine, nose-to-tail convoys invite annihilation. By doctrine, no stops except for fuel and emergencies is fantasy. Doctrine is about to be run over. On August 26, the first Red Ball columns roll in force, GMC CCKW 2.5, ton deuce and a half, workhorses strung across France like vertebrae, the spine of an army in motion. On August 28, German reconnaissance reports something they can scarcely categorize. A continuous column, lights visible for 20 kilometers, no blackout, no spacing worth the term, an arterial glow soaring through the night. Within 72 hours of Jodl's certainty, Patton's immobilized tanks are smashing through German positions along the Seine. Within a week, Paris breathes free air. Within a month, the Third Army stands at Germany's door, knocking with steel knuckles. The most subversive fact of all, one that Nazi racial theory cannot compute, is that 3 out of every 4 drivers on this express are African American. Segregated men in a segregated army, denied restaurants and rights in parts of the country they serve, now hold the throttle on the operation that keeps the most celebrated white general in Europe moving. On their truck doors bloom improvised heraldry, Patton's Blood Bank, Detroit to Berlin Express. Slogans painted with tired hands and dry humor. They don't ask permission from ideology to make history. They just drive. German officers read captured tonnage tables and call them propaganda. Then they hear the convoys at night and stop sleeping. They peer through hedgerows and see headlights, not ghosts. A panzer commander watches, bewildered. Vehicles at 30-second intervals, day and night, without pause. It is not military science, he writes. It is mass production applied to warfare. He is almost right. It is mass production fused to American tolerance for inefficiency in the name of speed, and to a culture that lets sergeants solve problems faster than colonels can authorize them. Every law the Wehrmacht trusts is still in force. Fuel burns, tires shred, engines overheat, men hallucinate from exhaustion. But another law has entered the field, loud as an unmuffled straight six. If you can keep 6,000 trucks rolling, you can bend battle to your schedule. The Red Ball Express is an answer to a question German planning never asked. What if the supply line moves like a front line? What if logistics isn't support, but the first blow? At the Wolfschanze, the maps still show roads as vulnerabilities. In the fields of France, those roads have become weapons: 2 one-way lanes, forward full, rearward empty, maintained by mobile workshops that treat a continent like a depot aisle. The Americans are not violating physics. They are paying its price in gasoline, rubber, and sleep, and paying on time every day. The joke that began in East Prussia Americans and their wasteful trucks has already curdled into silence. The convoy engines speak in a register the Wehrmacht cannot answer. Steel speaks, rubber answers, and the ground itself begins to move east under 3.5-mile-an-hour pressure. This is the sound of an empire learning a new vocabulary at gunpoint. Before the first Red Ball truck ever shifted into gear, Germany had built an empire on the belief that war was an art of precision, a mechanical symphony governed by rules, ratios, and discipline. The Wehrmacht's general staff treated warfare like engineering. Every operation was calculated, rehearsed, and timed with the exactness of a machine shop. Efficiency was the god of their doctrine, and order was its high priest. From that doctrine emerged Blitzkrieg lightning war, the perfect manifestation of German military logic. Fast, decisive, coordinated. Tanks, artillery, and infantry operating as one fluid organism. It worked in Poland, in France, even in the early weeks of Russia. But behind every thrust of armor was a truth the generals knew but refused to confess. Blitzkrieg was a weapon built on borrowed fuel. It ran not on genius, but on logistics, and Germany never had enough of it. By 1944, the numbers were merciless. 80% of all Wehrmacht transport still depended on horses. Of its remaining motorized columns, mechanical breakdowns were a daily plague. The Eastern Front had already taught them the price of distance. Roads that turned to swamps, trucks choking on mud and ice, fuel depots lost to partisans, rail lines paralyzed by differing gauges. Every German officer who'd served in Russia carried the same scar, the memory of tanks sitting idle while infantry scavenged for firewood. So when Allied armor poured out of Normandy and began sprinting east, the German High Command saw the same fatal pattern they had lived through themselves. A mechanized army racing beyond its supply lines. It was a story they had written before. General der Panzertruppe Heinrich von Luttwitz, who would soon command XLVII Panzer Corps, wrote confidently in July 1944, "The Americans face the same impossibility we faced in Russia. They have made their speed their enemy. Machines require fuel, and fuel obeys no commander." This was not arrogance, it was logic. For every mile Patton advanced, the cost multiplied. One infantry division needed 700 tons of supplies each day. One armored division, 1,000. 12 divisions, 12,000 tons daily. Multiply that by a 400-mile journey over bomb-cratered roads, with bridges wrecked and railheads still in ruins. Even with flawless conditions, which France did not provide, the numbers were absurd. Major General Siegfried Westphal, Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, wrote in his August 20th memorandum, "Even if the Americans possess unlimited trucks, which they do not, perfect roads, which they do not, and no mechanical failures, which is impossible, their advance cannot continue beyond 48 hours. Physical laws cannot be violated, not even by American industry." That last phrase, "not even by American industry," captured the essence of German belief. To them, war was a closed system. It obeyed geometry and fuel consumption charts, not ideology or improvisation. An army, like a machine, could only run within tolerances. And the Americans, the generals agreed, were violating those tolerances every hour. To the German mind, logistics was a limiting factor, not a weapon. They viewed the supply chain as a constraint to be endured, not an instrument to be wielded. Their culture of hierarchy and caution turned logistics into bureaucracy. Requisitions required signatures, maintenance required permission, initiative required orders. When something broke, they fixed it properly, or not at all. When a bridge fell, they waited for engineers. When a supply line failed, they slowed the advance. This was the belief system, that perfection prevents collapse. What they could not imagine was a nation that valued imperfection as an engine of motion. The Americans would prove that chaos, when powered by industry, could outpace precision. While German planners calculated impossibility, American officers like Lieutenant Colonel Loren Ayers of the Motor Transport Service stood before their own skeptical subordinates in a requisitioned French chateau and declared war on arithmetic. "Gentlemen," he said, "we're going to build a one-way highway from Cherbourg to the front. Every vehicle will run 20 hours out of 24. No stops except gas and emergencies. 12,500 tons a day, minimum." It sounded insane, and it was. But the United States had an advantage that transcended doctrine. It had turned industry into a religion. American factories were not merely producing weapons, they were mass-producing motion. Detroit could berth 50,000 trucks before breakfast. General Motors could produce more engines in a month than Germany could in a year. For a nation of engineers and assembly lines, the Red Ball Express was not an impossibility. It was a natural consequence. To the Wehrmacht, efficiency meant conserving strength. To the Americans, efficiency meant sustaining velocity. The Germans built machines to last. The Americans built enough machines that it didn't matter if they broke. That was the philosophical divide, a difference not just of strategy, but of civilization itself. In East Prussia, generals trusted the logic of scarcity. In Normandy, mechanics trusted the abundance of production. And somewhere between those two realities, the future of industrial warfare was about to shift forever. August 25, 1944. In a small French chateau commandeered as an improvised command post, Lieutenant Colonel Loren Ayers stands before a table littered with fuel charts, ration tables, and torn road maps. Around him, officers argue in low voices, the kind of argument born not from doubt, but from fear disguised as professionalism. Patton's spearheads are running dry. The Third Army is advancing faster than any army in recorded history, and faster than any plan written by man. Every calculation says the same thing. It can't continue. Ayers, exhausted, leans forward. "Then we'll stop calculating," he says. The room falls silent. In that sentence lies the contradiction that will fracture German military logic forever. The decision to defy mathematics not through miracle, but through machinery. They name the plan after an old railroad term, Red Ball. In railway jargon, a Red Ball shipment was priority freight. It moved first, stopped for nothing, took precedence over everything else. The army will do the same. They will build a one-way road across France, loaded trucks forward, empties back, headlights on, no blackout, no stops, no rest, no hesitation. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, commanding the advance section of the communications zone, reviews the figures with grim precision. "We need 140 truck companies, 5,958 vehicles, 90% availability, 20-hour driving days, convoy intervals 5 minutes apart, average speed 35 miles per hour. He looks up. "It's impossible by every manual ever written." Ayers answers, "Then it's time to write a new manual." That sentence, more than any tank or bomb, is what begins to terrify the Wehrmacht. Across the front, German intelligence officers log every intercepted radio transmission, every photograph, every report from recon units. The picture that emerges makes no sense. Convoys are moving openly, headlights blazing, in direct violation of every rule of warfare. Columns stretch for 20 kilometers at a time, nose to tail, through nights that should belong to the Luftwaffe. To the German eye, it's madness. To the American mind, it's efficiency. In the traditional model, Logistics was a servant. The front moved first. Supply followed. The Red Ball Express reverses the hierarchy. The convoy is now the front, an organism of steel arteries and rubber veins, pumping life forward into the war machine. 5,958 GMC deuce-and-a-half trucks become the moving skeleton of Patton's Third Army. They run on rotation, 20 hours of movement, 4 of maintenance. Mechanics work by lantern and cigarette glow, swapping engines in 45 minutes, cannibalizing wrecks for parts, pushing dead vehicles off the road like corpses cleared from a battlefield. They turn chaos into choreography. In Berlin, the OKH, German Army High Command, receives fragmentary reports from reconnaissance aircraft. Continuous traffic, no blackout, estimated 1,000 vehicles per hour, unbroken line of motion, not military discipline, industrial process. The phrasing matters. Not army, but process. For the first time, German analysts describe the enemy not as a fighting force, but as a production line. General-Leutnant Edgar Feuchtinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, observes through field glasses as convoys pour eastward through the night. They violate every law of survival, he writes. No camouflage, no intervals, no pauses. It is not strategy, it is a machine running on faith. He is half right. The Americans are not following faith. They are following throughput. Every component of the Red Ball Express exists to maintain motion. 5-minute intervals, enforced by military police checkpoints. Mobile maintenance crews stationed every 50 miles. Any truck below 25 miles per hour is removed, stripped, or set ablaze. The road becomes a living conveyor belt of fuel, shells, and rations, a mechanical bloodstream that refuses to clot. And the fuel that powers it all flows from an even deeper artery. Operation Pluto, pipeline under the ocean. Beneath the English Channel, flexible steel pipelines pump gasoline directly from Britain to the French coast. German intelligence hasn't even detected it. Every mile of pipeline is a secret vein, every gallon a quiet defiance of the laws of scarcity. When the Red Ball Express begins full operation, it burns 300,000 gallons of gasoline a day just to sustain itself. That's more than an entire German army group receives in a week. To the Wehrmacht, it's a display of criminal waste. To the Americans, it's the cost of acceleration. The contradiction deepens. Waste becomes strength. Excess becomes precision. The laws of conservation that shaped German thinking collapse under the sheer gravity of industrial mass. In East Prussia, Jodl and his staff still calculate. In France, the Americans have stopped calculating altogether. They are moving too fast for math. The German General Staff believes that order sustains power. The Americans are proving that motion is power, that in the industrial age, to stand still is to lose. By the end of August, the sound of the Red Ball Express fills the night air over France, a rolling thunder of 6,000 engines, unbroken, unrelenting, unstoppable. The Wehrmacht listens, and for the first time in years, they hear something unfamiliar in the dark. Not artillery, not bombers, just trucks, endless trucks, and the sound of inevitability. To understand the Red Ball Express, one must forget the image of soldiers marching to victory and instead imagine a nation transformed into an assembly line, a continent turned into a conveyor belt. The system begins at the western ports, Cherbourg, Saint-Lô, Le Havre. From there, warehouses explode with motion. Crates of ammunition, jerrycans of fuel, rations, and spare parts are stamped, loaded, and dispatched by the minute. Each shipment receives a red circle, the mark of absolute priority. It is not decoration, it is doctrine. Everything else, even combat operations, waits for the red ball. The highways of northern France become arteries. Engineers establish 2 parallel lanes, one eastbound for loaded trucks, one westbound for empties returning to the coast. Every 20 miles, a mobile repair depot stands ready. Every 50, a fuel point. Every 100, an emergency medical tent for drivers collapsing from exhaustion. Military police control intersections with the precision of machine relays. A truck that slows below 25 miles per hour is ordered off the road, stripped for parts, and replaced within minutes. The result is motion without pause, a logistics machine that operates 20 hours out of 24, fueled by manpower that never truly sleeps. The human engine. There are 23,000 drivers. 75% of them are African American soldiers, serving in a segregated army that will not allow them to eat beside the men they supply. Yet they drive. They create a culture within hours, a fellowship of exhaustion and defiance. Their trucks bear names scrawled in paint. Hitler, Here We Come. Detroit to Berlin Express. Patton's Blood Bank. They drive 20-hour shifts on Benzedrine and black coffee. They patch radiators with chewing gum, swap engines with hand winches, and pray over brake lines held together with wire. Accidents are constant collisions, rollovers, fires. 300 drivers will die before the operation ends. None stop. They do not fight with rifles. They fight with mileage. Every hour they drive extends Patton's advance by another mile. Every ton delivered translates directly into artillery shells, gasoline, and momentum. The material engine. The Red Ball Express runs on the GMC CCKW, the Deuce and a Half. 2.5 tons of standardized American engineering, all-wheel drive, waterproofed ignition, engine adaptable to low-grade fuel, modular enough to swap parts between wrecks. By 1945, General Motors will have produced more than 500,000 of them, more trucks than Germany will build of every type combined. Each one is a cog in a greater system, bound by a rhythm so strict it feels alive. Convoys depart every 5 minutes, 60 to 70 trucks per convoy, each separated by 500 yards. Speed, 35 miles per hour. The sound, a mechanical heartbeat rolling through the night, the maintenance machine. The Red Ball Express eats itself to stay alive. Every day, 1,800 trucks break down. Mechanics triage in 15 minutes, fix it, push it, or strip it. Nothing idle survives. Dead engines become donor organs. Tires are swapped, reused, rethreaded until nothing remains but cords. In 45 minutes, a new engine is bolted in. Mobile cranes travel with the convoys, lifting entire powertrains from one chassis to another like battlefield surgery. The result is inefficiency turned divine. While German engineers calculate optimal resource use, Americans feed the machine by feeding it more machines. Waste is not a flaw, it is the lubrication of scale, the fuel artery. Fuel is the blood, and Operation Pluto, pipeline under the ocean, is its heart. Beneath the English Channel, steel pipelines carry thousands of gallons per hour from Britain to France. German intelligence never discovers it. Along the Red Ball route, forward fuel dumps appear every 25 miles, guarded by MPs and stocked by tankers that run their own parallel convoys. No truck waits more than 10 minutes for refueling. The numbers stagger comprehension. In its first week, August 25-31, 1,944, the Red Ball Express delivers 89,939 tons of supplies. Daily average, 12,848 tons. Round trip, 686 miles. Fuel consumed by the operation itself, 300,000 gallons per day. To the German General Staff, these figures are fiction. No system could function under such strain. They are wrong. The industrial logic. German logistics doctrine is a cathedral, tall, orderly, and fragile. American logistics is a factory floor, noisy, chaotic, indestructible. Where German discipline relies on precision, American abundance relies on redundancy. Lose 10 trucks, send 20 more. Lose a bridge, build another in 14 hours. When the bridge at Mantes collapses under retreating German engineers, American combat engineers rebuild it in less than a day, using rubble from bombed buildings as foundation. Traffic detours 8 miles, resumes by dawn. To German observers, it looks like improvisation. To American planners, it's automation. Even when terrain turns against them, rain, mud, frost, the convoys do not stop. Chains on tires, alcohol in radiators, steam rising from engines like breath from living beasts. The Red Ball Express operates through every hour, every weather, every order to halt. It is no longer a supply line, it is a self-sustaining organism. The psychological effect. German reconnaissance pilots report continuous vehicle movement, headlights visible for 20 kilometers. Infantry at the front hear the convoys at night, endless, mechanical thunder. Soldiers begin calling it the sound of American infinity. For Wehrmacht units rationed to 3 bullets per rifle, the roar of those engines is more terrifying than artillery. It means the enemy has no limits. It means the war, once decided by strategy, is now decided by horsepower. The philosophy of motion. The Red Ball Express violates every German assumption about war, and yet it works. It proves that in the industrial age, victory belongs not to those who can serve, but to those who can afford to burn. Each truck mile is a heresy against the old religion of discipline. And with every heresy committed, the American machine grows faster. By the first week of September, Patton's Third Army is advancing 40 to 60 miles per day, twice the speed German theory considers possible. And behind every tank, every cannon, every assault crossing of a river, there is the unseen force of 6,000 trucks grinding forward, devouring fuel and distance. This is not war by command, it is war by throughput. It is not a march, it is a mechanism. By early September 1944, the German front has not just fractured, it has begun to dissolve. The maps on Hitler's war table are wrong within hours of being drawn. What his generals called an American logistical impossibility has turned into a moving horizon of engines and exhaust, pushing east faster than the Reich's reports can keep up. In the villages along the Red Ball route, the French wake to a phenomenon they can't yet name: the hum of endless machinery. 6,000 trucks, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The sky above them is not filled with planes or shells, but with vibration. The war itself seems to be moving not as armies once did, but as a process, continuous, mechanical, inevitable. The Wehrmacht begins to listen differently. Reconnaissance units report convoys so dense they form a single line of light visible from the air for 20 kilometers. Americans have abandoned all military precaution, one field officer writes. They do not hide, they do not disperse, they move as though untouchable. The truth is worse than untouchable, they are inexhaustible. From captured reports, German analysts attempt to make sense of what they are seeing. They calculate fuel consumption and conclude that the Americans must soon stop. They plot attrition curves and predict collapse within a week. But every week the numbers grow, not shrink. By mid-September, the Red Ball Express has moved over 200,000 tons of supplies, consumed millions of gallons of fuel, and rebuilt bridges, roads, and depots faster than German sappers can destroy them. Field Marshal Walter Model, the fireman of the Reich, reads the new reports and feels the ground shifting beneath him. If these reports are accurate, he writes, we face not a superior army, but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they do not fear us. They waste resources because they have infinite resources. We cannot defeat this with tactics. That is the moment of realization when the Wehrmacht's pride turns to paralysis. The German army, built on the premise of scarcity, now faces an enemy that fights by excess. For every truck the Red Ball Express loses, Detroit replaces it before the week is out. For every bridge blown, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers builds another overnight. For every exhausted driver, 2 more stand ready. The Americans have achieved something the Germans never imagined: logistics faster than consumption. On the front, Wehrmacht soldiers begin to crack under the noise. Each night, they hear the low roar of convoys echoing across the French countryside. Not artillery, not bombers, just trucks, endless trucks. The sound becomes psychological warfare. One German prisoner later recalls, "We could hear your trucks all night. We knew each sound meant more fuel, more shells, more men. We had 3 rounds per rifle. You had everything. The noise itself told us the truth. We were finished." Inside those trucks, exhausted American drivers fight a different battle. Many have not slept in 72 hours. They chew benzodrine tablets, drive through hallucinations, and see ghosts on the road. Some die behind the wheel, colliding in fog or burning alive in overturned vehicles. But morale remains unbroken because they understand what they're proving. Every mile driven is a rebuke to Nazi ideology. Every delivery denies Hitler's world another breath. For the Germans, the contradiction is now unbearable. The same racial hierarchy that told them these men were inferior has produced the drivers who are strangling the Reich's war machine. African-American truckers, men segregated in their own army, have become the arteries of Allied victory. Their existence alone invalidates Nazi science. Their performance annihilates it. Captured officers begin to speak the truth their superiors cannot print. General Hans von Luck, taken prisoner in September 1944, admits to his interrogators, "We knew we'd lost when we understood your supply system. You violated every rule, wasted fuel, abandoned vehicles, exhausted drivers, and yet succeeded through sheer volume. You industrialized warfare beyond our comprehension. The industrial imbalance is now absolute." The Red Ball Express consumes 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily, more than many German army groups receive for all purposes. And yet, for the Americans, the tanks never run dry. General Major Walter Warlimont studies aerial photos of Allied supply dumps and realizes the futility of resistance. "They have fuel depots larger than our entire reserves," he notes. "They burn more gasoline, moving gasoline, than we allocate to panzer divisions. This is not war as we understand it. It is industrial overflow." By late September, the imbalance turns fatal. Patton's divisions advance 40 to 60 miles per day, double the theoretical limit of armoured warfare. German defensive planning collapses under the velocity. Units cannot redeploy fast enough to form coherent lines. Artillery rationed to 50 shells a day faces American batteries, firing 100,000 rounds in a single 24-hour period, each shell delivered by Red Ball trucks that never stop. The Wehrmacht's maps no longer represent a front, only retreat. The old certainty of logistics, the law that fuel and distance must eventually break any army, is gone. The Americans have rewritten that law with steel and speed. When captured engineers are shown the convoy data, they refuse to believe it. They argue that the figures must be Allied propaganda, but their own eyes betray them. Endless columns of trucks, headlights unbroken, moving like veins of light through the French dark. Somewhere deep in East Prussia, Alfred Jodl reviews the reports that bear his earlier calculations, the confident conclusion that Patton would halt within days, perhaps hours. Now those same roads he once dismissed as liabilities are arteries of defeat, and the arithmetic he trusted has turned against him. The Red Ball Express has done more than fuel Patton's advance. It has overturned the intellectual foundation of German warfare. The old gods of order and precision are dead, buried under the roar of 6,000 American engines. After the fall of France, the Germans begin to study the Red Ball Express, the way archaeologists study a lost civilization with fascination, confusion, and disbelief. What they see is not simply a logistics operation, but a new form of war. Industrial war conducted at the scale of civilization itself. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, reviewing captured intelligence in 1945, puts it bluntly, "We were not defeated by an army, we were defeated by a production line." That realization cuts deeper than any tactical loss. For generations, Prussian doctrine had equated discipline with superiority, the idea that human order could triumph over material disadvantage. It was a belief system forged in the 19th century, polished through 2 world wars, and worshipped by every general in a grey uniform. The Red Ball Express obliterated it. It revealed that the new god of war was not the general, but the engineer, not the strategist, but the mechanic. Industrial democracy versus totalitarian efficiency. The German state was designed to command every action traced to an order, every mistake punished. American logistics worked in reverse. It thrived on delegation. Privates made decisions that German colonels would have demanded permission to make. A sergeant could reroute convoys, commandeer French buses, or repaint captured German trucks olive drab and drive them east. To German observers, This was chaos. To American results, it was genius. The Red Ball Express was decentralized power made visible 23,000 drivers operating like neurons in a collective brain, each reacting faster than any central command could think. It was democracy applied to machinery, a distributed intelligence of engines and hands. German officers, bound by the hierarchy they worshipped, could not adapt. They waited for approval while their enemy acted on instinct. When the system they faced began to move faster than they could reason, their entire philosophy of control became obsolete. The logic of waste. At its core, the Red Ball Express defied the German obsession with conservation. Every component of the operation was inefficient by old-world standards. Engines overworked, tires shredded, vehicles discarded after 10,000 miles, 1/3 of their expected lifespan. But the Americans understood something the Germans did not. Efficiency is meaningless without scale. The goal was not to save, but to sustain, to keep the flow moving, no matter the cost. Each week, Detroit replaced what Europe destroyed. Ships unloaded new trucks faster than the Germans could burn them. The American economy had transformed logistics into a renewable resource. Waste became strength, redundancy became immortality. This was the philosophical revolution, the realization that abundance could defeat mastery. The German system, elegant but brittle, could not comprehend a culture that treated inefficiency as fuel for progress. The collapse of ideology. Even Nazi racial doctrine fractured under the weight of this new order. The Red Ball Express depended on African-American drivers, men the Reich considered subhuman, yet these same men built and maintained the greatest supply network in modern history. Captured officers tried to reconcile the contradiction. They failed. The evidence was too visible, too humiliating. Black sergeants calculating load distributions faster than German engineers. French civilians cheering drivers who shared rations the Wehrmacht had stolen. German prisoners watching men they had been taught to despise keep Patton's divisions alive. In the aftermath, Nazi racial science quietly stopped publishing on American logistics. The numbers themselves were heresy. Red Ball economics. The cost of the operation was staggering: 57 million gallons of fuel, 180,000 tires, 5,000 vehicles destroyed. By German standards, it was economic suicide. By American standards, it was an investment. Each day of war cost the United States $250 million. The Red Ball Express shortened that war by 6 months. Its $100 million price tag repaid itself in a single day of victory. No German staff officer could comprehend this arithmetic. To them, war was expenditure. To America, war was production, an equation where motion itself generated value. The machine as civilization. The Red Ball Express was more than logistics. It was civilization in motion, the full weight of an industrial society made kinetic. 1,000 factories, 10,000 workshops, millions of workers, all condensed into the roar of 6,000 engines on a one-way road. It proved that in the 20th century, victory no longer belonged to nations that fought hardest, but to those that moved fastest. Power had become mechanical, measurable in ton-miles and fuel flow rather than courage or ideology. When Field Marshal Guderian, father of German armoured warfare, was shown the data after the war, he said only this: "We invented blitzkrieg, but never solved its limit logistics. The Americans solved it through industrial excess we deemed impossible." The Red Ball Express was not a supply line. It was a river of steel that drowned us. This was the final inversion. The Germans had taught the world that speed wins wars. The Americans proved that speed itself could be mass-produced. The industrial lesson. After 1945, every modern military studied the Red Ball Express. Its lessons became doctrine. Volume defeats precision. Redundancy replaces resilience. Decentralization accelerates command. Waste, if sustained, becomes strategy. In this new world, industry replaced valor, and motion replaced heroism. The battlefield became a supply chain. The Red Ball Express did not just defeat the Wehrmacht. It ended the age of human warfare and began the age of industrial warfare, where the outcome of battle is decided not by genius, but by throughput. It was not perfection that crushed the Reich. It was production. When the engines finally stopped, they did not fade out, they simply ceased, as though the world had held its breath. November 16th, 1944. The Red Ball Express is officially discontinued after 82 days of continuous operation. In that time, it has carried 412,000 tons of supplies, travelled 122 million ton-miles, and consumed 57 million gallons of fuel. Its work is done. France is free. Patton's army stands at Germany's border, but the noise it left behind, that deep industrial heartbeat, never truly went silent. To the German generals, the Red Ball Express became a nightmare that survived defeat. Many of them, questioned in Allied captivity, spoke not of tanks or bombers, but of trucks. "We prepared for everything," one captured officer said. "Your tanks, your planes, your ships. But we never prepared for your trucks." He was not speaking of vehicles. He was speaking of civilization, because behind every truck was a factory. Behind every factory, a city. Behind every city, a continent that had decided to turn its entire industrial body into a weapon. Germany had mobilized an army. America had mobilized a system. The Red Ball Express was that system made visible, a mechanical bloodstream carrying democracy at 35 miles an hour. It was the proof that freedom, organized and industrialized, could outproduce tyranny. When the convoys ended, they dissolved faster than they had appeared. In 72 hours, the depots emptied, the roads cleared, the drivers reassigned. The infrastructure that had fed an army simply vanished back into the landscape, as if erasing its own existence. The Germans, used to projects that took years to build and months to dismantle, could not comprehend it. The Americans built temporary empires, disposable civilizations, and moved on. What remained were ruts carved into French roads, the smell of gasoline in the soil, and stories. Stories of drivers who pushed beyond the limits of endurance 72-hour shifts through fog and mortar fire. Of mechanics performing miracles on dead engines in the dark. Of men like Corporal John L. Houston, who drove for 48 hours without rest to deliver shells to the front. Of Private Booker T. Washington, who drove a burning truck 2 miles to a field hospital before diving out as the cab exploded. These men were not remembered in parades. They were remembered in tonnage, the invisible metric of modern warfare. But without them, the tanks never rolled, the shells never fired, the war never ended. In 1945, as Germany surrendered, its surviving commanders finally understood the new law that had replaced their old doctrine. In the industrial age, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. The Americans had taken that maxim literally and turned it into thunder. 3 years later, President Truman ordered the desegregation of the U.S. armed forces. The political speechwriters credited moral progress. History knew better. The pressure for equality had been forged on the roads of France under the wheels of the Red Ball Express. The men who had fed the war machine demanded recognition, and they earned it in gasoline and fire. In the decades that followed, the veterans of the Red Ball Express carried their experience into peacetime. They founded freight companies, designed interstate highways, and built the logistics skeleton of modern America. They had learned in Europe that motion is civilization, that a nation able to move everything, everywhere, all the time, cannot be conquered. In that sense, the Red Ball Express never really ended. It simply changed lanes, from military convoy to commercial highway, from war effort to world system. The lesson remained the same. Speed is strength, logistics is destiny. And so the echo continues in the hum of diesel engines across continents, in cargo ships stacked with steel containers, in the grid of airports, highways, and data cables that define the modern era. The Red Ball Express was not a footnote of World War II. It was a turning point in the history of industrial civilization, the moment when motion itself became a form of power. It proved that nations are not defeated by lack of courage, but by lack of capacity. That the side which masters supply does not just win wars, it defines what progress means. When the Germans surrendered in May 1945, many of them did so in silence, staring at the same trucks they had once mocked. the same engines that had crushed their empire not with glory, but with logistics. And as they watched the convoys roll east toward the Rhine, they understood too late the new truth of the modern age, that in a world of machines, victory belongs not to those who fight hardest, but to those who never stop moving.